I have the chairperson of the National Private Schools Association. He will tell us the real name of the organization, but his name is Mr. Chirabira Asadu. Not so? You're most welcome, sir, to the show.
Thank you, Pris.
We are so glad to have you.
For hosting me on this program.
You're most welcome.
Yes.
How is the situation like currently in your association?
As you are aware, we have been grappling with many challenges as private education institutions. To mention, needless, because when you talk about loans, it has been a big stumbling block to many of our schools. Many have been taken, auctioned. Others are struggling to see that they pay up. We have worked out modalities with the banks to save these schools from being bought and taken by masqueraders. We have had
masqueraders or people that lent you their money?
There are people who lent us money, but there are those who did not.
Okay.
But they are using banks to take over the property of the schools.
Okay.
Yes. And then there are people who want school land, people who are, all those are waiting. So there have been a lot of challenges and social politics at play to see that schools, there are people who want school land, they work with banks, they want to auction. The main branches of banks are not aware what the district post branches are doing. So there are so many challenges, but we are trying to move on top of the game as an association with our lawyers and interventions with banks.
Okay.
The issue of COVID has been key in the schools, managing big numbers, managing parents throwing to schools, and of course, inadequate resources to run the schools because schools are totally run bankrupt.
That is where I want us to start from. You opened the schools with loans around your necks, with everything. How did you handle as private schools which survive on what we bring in as parents? How did you handle that term, the first one?
Of course, as I said, we agreed with the Minister of Finance's statement that we had to convince ourselves, those who could borrow. Borrowing was not a big challenge, but borrowing for what? Were schools going to be opened permanently or to close again after borrowing? That was the question at heart at that time. But when we realized that everything was going to be okay, then we tried to divide means. Those who have other side lands, pieces of land, they decided to sell. Those who had other properties which are not necessarily of a school character, they had to sell. Or those who had to borrow. We had negotiated with the banks, like Bank of Africa, Centenary Bank, to reduce, to wipe away all the interest that had accrued and to stay the loan up to when the schools start gaining some finances to be able to gradually pay back. So we agreed with some banks, and those banks again gave in some new loans in addition to what had existed, and with the help of the parents we managed to cope up. However, it was not a better situation to run a school. The resources were so meager, but we managed to improvise in the midst of the need for those resources to put up the SOP requirements. But we maneuvered every other month, where adding on as children were increasing. And we are so grateful with the government for sympathizing with us, especially tolerating the gradual process of putting all the requirements in place. However, it did not help us to solve the problems, but at least there was some patience, and gradually we could keep on improving every other day. By the time we concluded the term, things were a bit fine, and we are almost recovering to normal performance, only that we were now swept in by the issue of the increasing prices, the economic situation.
Is it because of the loans and the financial constraints that you had that justified the too high charges you threw against test parents?
A private school entirely survives on fees.
Is that a justification for exaggerated costs?
The costs are not exaggerated. However, there might be a few individuals who might use the opportunity of the situation at any time to exaggerate. But at a bigger, looking at a bigger picture, at least the majority, we are able to work it out with the Ministry of Education, regulate fees, but ensure that there was increment. And for term 1, there was no increment per se.
People increased fees.
There were very few. And we had put hard tasks to all those schools that had to increase fees. Because our campaign, our struggle was a back to school campaign and changing the mindset. The parents, the learners, we wanted the students back to school. And the parents were economically poor. How could we have them back to school? By maintaining the fees we had. And to whatever school where the minister had put up, working with the ministry, a free toll-free line where parents could call, where people in the community could call in to report schools that have increased the fees. And we monitored it. We tried to monitor it in spite of the difficult situation, but the majority of the schools did not increase fees. We managed to do that, and we maintained, because we were also looking at maintaining the students we had and calling them back to come back to school. That was a bigger task. Now, private schools define levels, and the services offered apart from teaching, learning, because building, mentoring, molding a learner, a student, it's not about only learning in class. There are a number of aspects. There are a number of things you have to do to ensure that you bring up a wholesome person, because you are determining a future of someone. You are putting someone in a perspective of what he's going to be in the future. How do you mold that person? You need money. Private education is expensive because everything is privately provided. You need people who come to talk to these people. You need trips, you need guiding, you need career guidance, you need people who guide in one way or the other. Mentoring a wholesome person, you need a lot of things. So with that, a school varies depending on the services to offer. Even feeding itself is a key service in schools. And the service of feeding, nutrition differ from one school to another. Therefore, schools charge fees depending on the kind of services they are offering and the quality. Doing research in schools, paying good teachers, experienced teachers, it is very expensive.
Thank you, Mr. Chidabira. Actually, that is what we are told when we go for vacancies in these schools. But if you take an assessment, it is a few of you, private schools, that actually provide the services that you advertise. Why? Even when, even a service like provision of skilled teachers, fully skilled teachers, a good number of you, private school owners, do not have skilled teachers. You get people that can take what you can offer.
Not as such. A private school is entirely meant for quality. And if you talk about the pillars of quality, one of the key aspects is the human resource. In order for you to get something good out of the learners, you must have experienced people. But also experienced people vary from one area to another. When we talk of rural districts, it is difficult to get the majority of the qualified teachers because, you know, many people tend to throng to urban districts for greener pasture and better pay. Therefore, you find there is a vacuum of well-trained teachers, qualified teachers in some rural districts. Take, for example, Karamoja. Even the demand for education is low. Now, people who are there, to be able to get a qualified teacher to serve in such a kind of environment, it is also hard. So, it's difficult to run a school 100% in Karamoja being managed by...
Is it true that somebody can fail to get a qualified teacher in Uganda? With all the institutions and all the graduates that we have from the schools of education, teacher training schools, is it possible that somebody can fail to get a qualified teacher in this country? Teachers
have been available.
Yes.
And the number of teachers over the years have tremendously increased.
Thank you.
And we do not have a vacuum of teachers apart from science teachers. So for the rest of the teachers at all levels, they have been available until many of them moved out for greener pasture during the COVID problem. So in most cases, what I'm trying to put forward is that the management, the capacity for schools to sustain well-trained teachers, qualified teacher, vary from one area to another area. But most of the districts in urban areas, they have what we call a trained teacher. At least the majority of the schools in urban districts, they have professional teachers because they have been available and we have been utilizing them.
Okay.
So there is no much problem as far as that is concerned. Even where we have a vacuum today, replacements are being made. The only challenge is that we usually tend to have now more of new freshers in the system than the old ones, which has an impediment on the quality of education we have to offer. Because the new ones learn from the old ones.
Okay.
Now, when all the old ones move away, then it creates a very big gap in the sector.
There were stories all over that many of our teachers, especially those in the private schools, went for JO, they went into other businesses. There is a teacher we met and he had started the chapati stall and he told us, with the money I get here, I cannot go back to be mistreated at a school where people will be paying me peanuts. How were you affected as private school with COVID that created a retrenchment of people from teaching into other sectors of work?
Of course, COVID has been a big challenge to the sector. All sectors are affected. It sounds common, but not common. Education sector was highly affected.
Okay.
Because there was no progression. There are no teachers. Those who are there devastated. Those who didn't move out for CHEO, they decided to leave the professional for the new jobs they tried and they saw they were more paying than the teaching, which is a full-time commitment. So, as educationists, we have found a very big challenge which we need to bridge, and that's why we are pleading to government from the onset. We need to prioritize education. We need to prioritize because government is not prioritizing education.
We shall come to that. Why do you pay peanuts to teachers even when you squeeze a lot of money from us parents, private schools? Why do you pay peanuts to teachers yet you get a lot of money from us parents?
I think it is not the case for all schools, but there might be schools with such a practice.
Actually, let's say if there are some schools, then we say most of the schools, private schools, you pay very little. Actually, that is if they have received it. Those that you pay during holidays, of course, because they are not working, you don't give them anything. There is no retainer for them during holidays. Why? Yet most of you actually, proprietors of schools, are teachers by profession. You would be feeling for your brothers and sisters in the profession.
Every sector has what we call quack members in the sector. In schools, in education, we also have what we call quack schools. Schools which are not serious, they open up, they start, but such schools at the end of the day, they close themselves because of incapacitation. When you talk about a serious school which has started education business, one of the key pillars of quality is better remuneration to the teachers to maintain them. Without retention of teachers, you cannot talk about quality because things keep on changing every day and you cannot maintain the standards and the achievements. Therefore, for any serious school, it will struggle to maintain its good teachers. I train my teachers, I bring workshop, I facilitate to make them better. Now, my task is how to maintain them. Maintenance is in terms of payment. How do I comfort this teacher so that he does not even look for another school? How can I make a pay that he cannot get in another school? That is a school which has clear objectives of achieving education and equality. Now, when you come to Quaker schools, it is vice versa. With the coming in of our associations, we have strengthened some of these gaps. We have strengthened and we have put a forum where teachers can report directors of schools, because it is some few directors who tend not to pay teachers. They take 3 months without paying. At the end, they pay 1 month. They accumulate a year. At the end of the year, they bring in another teacher in order to be able to save what would be paid to the other teacher. We have seen all that, but we are making the sector now better.
How? What are the measures that you are taking to ensure that this is solved?
Of course, as an association,
Because a talk to a teacher in a private school will really dismay whoever would talk to a private school teacher. They have a lot of bad stories. What measures are you taking to ensure that they get better remuneration?
but also teachers have to be patient and tolerate. If you find a starting school or a growing school and you agree to work for it, on terms you have put down, because that is a key factor now. Whatever we are going to deal with the teacher in terms of payment, we must have clear terms. There must be a contract, there must be clear terms of service. If you are going to pay 20,000, we agree in writing. And that's the one sensitization we are carrying out amongst the teachers. The teachers are quite aware now of the association and the desks we have created that cater for the teachers' grievances. Now, in case you are not, that is one of the key challenges we are finding. Now, we have put a desk at the private schools in our offices and in all the districts where reports are made, and then we go in for these people. We call them in our tribunal, we discuss. Where you are hesitant, we have rules and regulations and rules of conduct and management of staff. There are also provisions which are statutory now, and as far as employment is concerned, which were set by the Minister of Education.
So are you saying private schools currently employ people with appointment letters, contracts, and assurance like that?
That you'll find it in 90% schools.
What happens to the 10%?
Of course, compliance is not easy. And in order to have 100% compliance, we must do a lot of footwork.
Actually, there is a senior educationist who told me that, you see, like I said, no one has vulgarized the dignity of a teacher like their fellow teachers who own private schools. Do you now give appointment letters and contracts to your teachers?
This is a must now. It is a must. But previously it was also a must, but there was an enforcement. I want to thank the Minister of Education and the district education authorities. We have files in our offices with the contracts of teachers and appointment letters. We start with probation and then appointment. The only adjustment was you don't need to come up with a contract of 10 years. You make a contract that gives flexibility to both of you and be at will to terminate each other's services.
Okay.
1 year, 2 years. Okay? But it should be in writing. At the end of the year, if you are doing well, then we continue with the contract. We renew. If you are not doing well, of course, you look for another post elsewhere. That's where we are. But 90% are complying with this. Many private schools, and we have sensitized them. There is no need now. Why, if you are a committed person, why don't you sign a contract with a teacher? Why don't you issue an appointment letter? And even teachers demand for them. And if in the event that you are not given, you shall be notified. We have sensitized the teachers in our workshops. When you communicate to us, of course we shall visit the schools. And when we visit the schools also, we carry out support supervision as an association. Sometimes we work with the districts, sometimes we do it on our own to see what is happening in the schools in line of what we think a modern private school should run. How should it run? And compliance with the minimum requirements and basic as required by the Minister of Education. We cannot have all of them on board, but there are those which are actually, they call them basic requirements and minimum standards. There are those that must be at play in order school to be called a school. So we look at those cores and then we see treat that schools have them. We sensitize them in a friendly way. We get pilot schools where schools go to benchmark, they exchange ideas and expertise. And the sector, we have tried to organize the sector. That's why the association is there, so that we are able to run a sector professionally, and the sector helps our country and the education sector, to the education industry, to move in the right direction.
Okay. What is the relationship between your association and the Ministry of Education?
As partners, we are partners.
What is the relationship like?
I think of recent, our relationship has improved. The ministry has found more need to work with the partners.
Okay.
We are the partners who are working with government to implement the government goal of education for all.
You say of recent. So previously, what was
Previously,
the
there
story
were
like?
many challenges. Many policies were coming. You know, the ministry is all about policies.
Yes.
And when you bring policies minus the stakeholders, then it faces challenges in its implementation. Who's going to implement it? Who is going to take the voice? We have so many schools, 28,000 private education institutions. How many workers at the district? How many workers at the ministry who are supposed to oversee the activities in these schools, who are supposed to oversee academic business in these schools? So there was a gap, and the ministry realizes it. Of recent, almost private schools are on board, not only for COVID, but even before COVID, a few years before COVID. We have been on board, and we have worked well with the ministry. We have guided them well on these issues, fees payment, regulation of private schools, what. We need also regulations. We need the policies that matter to us, policies that keep schools working, policies that enable investment in schools. Investing in a school is a painful venture whose returns comes after years. So the tolerance we pay as private investors, there's no sector you will find staunch investors like education. Education is made by local people, we, the bones of Uganda. That's why we are struggling. And in Uganda, unlike other countries in the region, many schools are started by fair educationists. When you go to Kenya, presidents, ministers are the ones starting education institutions. It is not the case in Uganda, which would emphasize a lot of professionalism. And that's why we are struggling to ensure that schools are run professionally by qualified people who have all what it takes, and working with the Ministry of Education to ensure that the policies that come are well harmonized, so that there is no pulling ropes, and then we are able to preach the same gospel.
Okay, thank you so much. We're taking a short break, but on return, we are going to look at a number of other things within the sector that concern you as people in the private wing of the education sector. To you watching, thank you so much. We are taking our children back on Monday to school, but most of the people that are going to receive them are these people that we pay some good sums of money. We have to ask them some questions before they receive our children. Thank you so much for watching. Enjoy this break. UBC One-on-One, welcome back from the break. We are paying a visit to the Association of Private Schools in Uganda as we prepare to take back children to school on Monday. We hear from government every time about the plans they have for those other schools where we take our children that are owned and managed by government. How about these gentlemen and ladies who are in the private wing? What do they have for our children? We have their chairperson, Mr. Chirabira, here, and we are sharing a lot of information with him. So welcome back from the break.
Thank you.
Yes. You said you have a very good relationship with government as an association. Government is coming up with a number of programs to boost the education sector. There's a new curriculum for secondary education. There are a number of things. How do you adopt this, all these programs, as the private wing?
To clear the air, the working relationship is based on how we can better the education sector, teaching, learning, but it's not financial. Private schools, in terms of finance, school facility, grants which come from outside, from Uganda, donor fund, budget, private schools are totally left out of that. So
you don't have to be beneficiaries.
Yeah, there are grants which come from outside. They are for benefit of education in Uganda, not only public, but there is no share of the donor fund to the private sector, and yet it is for all children in Uganda. Even those in the private, they are meant to be in public schools. So we are helping government to do its work. And even a private school, even if it is private, but it is of a public character, by way of what we do, the curriculum we implement, the orders, the way we have to declare our resources that we use in schools, everything. That's why you see, wherever there is a policy, government is getting on you. Government is trying to regulate you. Government is trying to take charge of you so that the sector, such a pivotal sector, is a central gear sector, is managed well, which is not bad. So, but it should be in a well-harmonized way. Even in resources, we also need to better infrastructure in our schools. If it comes from the donor fund, even budget, Why can't we be provided with a budget to improve ICT transformation in schools? Provided with computers, provided with what? All of that.
Private schools?
Now, coming
You want government support?
We want government support.
In terms of equipment and facilitation?
Yes.
To do business?
We pay taxes.
Yes.
How do we
you're
benefit?
Doing business.
No, the school is
Actually,
not...
You're doing business just like any other business person.
But a school is not as such a business. When you call it a business, but a school of a public character is not doing business. People take it to be business. That's why you hear government regulating fees. Why don't they regulate hospitals? Why are they now not regulating prices of commodities? This is a liberal economy. They opened up. However, they liberalized education, but it is in brackets. So we would think that they would come in one way or the other.
Because why they have to regulate your charges is because with the character of your job, you may take advantage of the masses and charge exorbitantly.
No, the masses are free. They are free to choose where they can fit. Schools vary in levels and terms of payments. You look for a school where your means can reach. You are not forced to go to school B and leave A. Leave A and go to B because of the services provided. Services are provided by money. Private education is expensive. But we don't want to create a dichotomy within the education sector where one level is far. You know, with the coming in of private education, there was a lot of competition. That is health that was created in terms of performance. If you want to know from year to year, private institutions have led in terms of performance at all levels. This doesn't come as a by the way. You have to pay for it. Good teachers, experienced teachers, facilitate learning, buy computers, buy photocopiers, print papers, think ahead. That's what it means to perform. Excellence is out of hard work. But we need to work with government. We need a vote. There is a vote we are claiming from government. We pay taxes. One way government should come and help schools to put up better sanitation facilities. Rather than closing schools. Government can come. Now we are in a digital age. Uganda is left behind. By the time we are talking about education and the Kajubi's report, there was nothing like a transformations in ICT, internet, digital. Now the world is changing. In lockdown, you have seen how we have been fumbling. Take children, use digital, we are going to use internet, no one knows it. There are no instructors, there are no ICT teachers in schools. You are bringing ICT in secondary, there is an ICT in primary. How will you have that chronological arrangement that is going to...
There are subjects we start in secondary school.
No, ICT today must start in primary. Even a phone itself is a computer. Learners, students, pupils in primary schools can manage, can make research. Senior one now going to make a research.
So you want government to support you as private schools in all that?
On key issues, especially on infrastructure, and those that are taken to be of a public kind of nature, that of help to government, research, innovation. You can't do innovation without ICT. That is a key aspect that is coming in. It was nowhere in the recommendations of the Kajubis, of the white paper, of what, and the other countries are moving. We are not transforming. How is government helping private schools to digitalize? This is now an international requirement. Where are we now?
But as a people that look at a clientele, do you really need government support? Isn't that supposed to be a self-move, a self-initiative to ensure that you are in that direction, to better your school, to better the position of your school?
We can better even without government, yes. Because today we are without government. Even when we are at the time where it was critical that we needed government support, we couldn't get it. But what we are saying as Ugandans and private investors, people from outside are given land to put up factories, to put up what? We have never heard of a private investor being given land to put up a school. We fetch all this. We are exonerated. We have to share the cake. Donor fund has to come. School facility grant has to come. We pay taxes when the government is budgeting. There is no slot. It says maybe this, whether school is well off or not, development in schools never end. Today I have one skyscraper. We started in Papyrus. We put up bricks. We put up what? We are in skies now. But still we need land. We expand. That's why we are saying even the taxes, we are asking the president to terminate the taxes.
At that very point?
Yes.
this has been your cry that all the times I've talked to you. Taxes, taxes, taxes. Do you feel you have overtaxed as private schools?
Yes,
How?
we pay over 9 taxes. Others call them expenses or charges.
What are those?
A school like this, those they might call them expenses, charges or what, but we are paying them. You will pay, first of all, leave alone the known income tax, which is a very big thorn in the flesh of the private schools. Every, what we call a surplus, for them they call it profit. Every surplus you get as a school, it is taxed. And yet the development in a school is based on these surpluses.
I see a clash on just language.
Expansion.
Language based on position and interest.
Expansion in schools depend on that surplus. And before you realize this surplus, had fetched expenses in putting up the infrastructure, buying the land. You start looking at a school at a time when it is having a surplus, but you don't look at its genesis. You don't look at that background of investing, putting up this for the sake of the country, which would be a government responsibility. Now, after that, then you charge me a tax. The money I would use to put up another infrastructure, to buy land and put up another campus, I use it to pay taxes. And yet, if I don't put up a school, government will income more money in putting up infrastructure in school to cater for the increasing numbers.
Of course, government has to cater for a certain section of the public that may not afford your services.
Now, and if you want parents, the public to afford, you must do something. But we are not all that calling a lot of help, but we are claiming a vote that must come to the private sector. Income tax is there. You pay local taxes. Licenses, we pay licenses when you go to Wakiso here, Kampala here, and even other districts to a tune of $1 million. We pay ground rent, and schools are known to be having big chunks of land, and the payment of ground rent depends on the size of the land. We pay property rates for the property infrastructure that is on that land. All of that is money. We pay, even for our teachers, we pay the local government taxes, because for them, they will charge you on their payments. A teacher will tell you I have to pay taxes. So you give me a salary that is going to help me cater for the taxes. That is still an expense. Withholding. Wherever you serve me in my institution, a sack of flour, maize flour, posho, I have to deduct a tax for government, which they will come and get at a later time. I have to send it to government.
You see, just like any other person in business.
How many taxes are those? Our school vans, you see, we pay third parties, we pay PMO, we pay VAT on fuel, we pay tenders in the districts for moving on the district roads. How can just one education institution survive in the midst of that, and it has to feed the learners, the students? You have to pay the teachers in the midst of all those. So we think, all in all, we have been with the president 3 times. He had, at one moment, we convinced him to abolish the income tax, and he did so. And previously, 6 years back, it was brought back.
It was restored.
Yes, it was restored. And the president did not officially write to us, terminating the other first instruction he made. So in the midst of that, there are so many challenges about taxes in schools, and whichever school you will go to, you'll find these problems there. All of those are issues, and all of that goes back to school fees. How do we meet this? It goes back to school fees.
You squeeze the parent.
Yes, we have to squeeze, because for me, I invested in buildings and all of that. Then the survival of the school is meant by the parents, because the school is helping the parents within that particular area. Now, the other issue you talked about, very key, is about the new curriculum. We embraced the new curriculum.
Yes, that's why I wanted to take you.
And we welcomed it, and it is good. And we are among people who believe that we have to move. The world changes, and we have to go with the world.
Yes.
Because Uganda will be left behind. But now the problem we have, even when things are good, the government has no strategy on implementation of many of its policies and programs. From the onset, a good program was marred with a lot of inconsistencies.
How?
workshops for the teachers. How do you start training a teacher when a school has opened, when children are in the class? A teacher leaves the class, goes for a workshop, comes back, he has to pass on what he has got from the workshop to the learners without, of course, grasping it. What quality are you trying to deliver? And how prepared are you to be able to ably communicate something important, a message to a learner which has to transform his understanding of a perspective of a practical nature, So that was issue number one. Issue number two, how do you roll on a curriculum without enough learning aids? We started the lower secondary curriculum without books. The prototype that are supposed to guide came in later. Almost they have come after COVID, actually, after COVID. But we had started running. Now, that even today now, publishers have started coming up with books, NCDC coming up with this. Now, even when we are commencing after COVID, there was no clear program.
Isn't it you people in the industry that are not flexible enough to move with the times? If government comes up with something, one would expect that you jump on it and...
How do you jump? The experts, the people who have to impart this new curriculum within the teachers are from a government department, NCDC. All of the programs of how the program is of the sensitization is going to roll on is managed and commanded by NCDC. At a time when NCDC has to roll on the sensitization program, there is no money for them to go out. They were very ready actually. NCDC was ready with everything. They have done things on time. They had done everything on time. But there was no money to roll on the program countrywide. Even when we were commencing the term, we managed to pay our teachers lunch, transport to go in for these workshops to prepare them for the class. But doing this, it is a responsibility of government. We share responsibilities. Exams, curriculum, those remain the responsibilities of government. For us, our work as private schools is to make sure that we pay our teachers. And even in private schools, we buy ourselves textbooks. But I want to thank our government that this time managed to give.
Because I was going to ask you, where in your relationship with government do you see a positive? Yes.
This time in the provision of the learning materials, I want to appreciate and thank them. They managed to give free of charge. They managed to distribute learning materials to our students and our learners free of charge. And we have them, and they are very expensive, by the way. Schools couldn't manage. But to run other textbooks, of course, schools have to sustain that, which is no problem. But how do you bring the service that you want to bring into the sector? Yes. The new change, the curriculum. How do you sensitize people? How do they come on board? How do you involve everyone? And at what time? That is the issue.
Everybody has cried about our education system not being in the line that can really stop unemployment. How much are you doing as private institutions in the country to see to that? That you give a service that gives us a Ugandan that can do something for themselves, that can be of good value to this country.
The skilling aspect being key to a private school investor, it is expensive. However, it is expensive. It is a way to go. In one way or the other, yes. At some level, many schools have not managed to implement it thoroughly well, the way it should be. But we are on the onset. We are starting the arrangement.
You talked about people that have taken land from schools, schools that have lost land to money lenders, and those people that you called masqueraders. How have you helped these schools and your colleagues, other proprietors of schools, to get through this kind of quagmire?
This is so common, and even without COVID, it has been happening.
Really?
Yes.
We thought the loan problems came during COVID. I know of schools.
They exaggerated the situation.
Okay.
But however, the situation has not been to the magnitude it has been during the lockdown, because the lockdown was used by many. But even also the banks themselves, there were interventions we made in Eastern Uganda, where the district bank was auctioning a school to someone was willing, even in Mitiana here, it happened. But we interfered, we approached the main branch. So what we did for the schools, we managed to put up a chamber, a council. We have our lawyers. The association have a team of lawyers we partnered with, and recently we have strengthened our partnership. They work with us, they guide us, they also guide our member schools. Wherever they are challenged, wherever they have such issues, and it is them actually who have helped us to go out of such and guiding us how we can go about some of these issues of masqueraders, money lenders, and some schools ignorantly have worked out agreements which are really very funny to them, and they are also
unworkable agreements.
They are unrealistic, but it is because of ignorance. That's why we managed to put up this chamber of council of lawyers to help us with their wise counsel to guide the schools, consultation and etc. But as I talk now, we are almost on top of the situation.
How ready are you guys for next term? We are going for term 2 after the lockdown. You saw whatever you went through during the first term. How prepared are you? I'm talking about the whole field as private schools. How ready are you? Because the other, your other partners in the government domain, they have a big father up there, government, who ensures that all is well. In your line, how ready are you for the second term?
It is quite challenging from term 1 up to this term. However, the challenges vary. Situations are varying, but we are still grappling with many challenges. It is time, I think, to think right and make proper decisions. It is time for the schools. We are organizing ourselves. We are preparing for the reopening. We are talking to our parents. We are trying to organize catchments that are going to help us initiate the learners into the current situation, because you know, with the soaring prices, we are going to have issues of strikes in schools, in changing of meals, changing of these things might change a bit. But all in all, we are trying to have sessions. We are guiding in our beginning of term meetings. This week we have, and next week we are guiding proprietors and head teachers to have counseling to the learners, to conduct workshops for the teachers in their schools in preparation for the opening and how they are going to organize the teachers. We are talking to our parents to understand the situation and see how they can help schools to go out of the current challenge. We work together to see how we can solve some of these issues. But in the midst of that, we are also trying to see how we can cope up with our staff, the teachers, where they rent, how they feed, how they do what. So we are preparing for the reopening, and we are calling upon all our parents to take their children for vaccination.
Let me not forget this. Exaggerated requirements. A P1 child, actually not even P1, top class, is sent to bring a box of pencils, a box of colored pencils, a ream every term. Top class, P1, a ream every term.
A box of colored pencils is used
every term.
Every day, every week, we have drawing and coloring lessons. We have coloring competitions in schools when you come to nursery sections. Pencils, children use them. They use pencils almost every week. Ever buy, if you have a day scholar, especially in the nursery, ever buy pencils at home and see how they deal with them. Sometimes they eat them, sometimes they break them, sometimes they use them most of the time and they get finished. The term is 3 months. You bring these things once, and after demanding, I will not call, after bringing in this, I will not request you again in the middle of the term to bring in more requirements.
Then in the secondary section, people are sent for things.
But when you talk about rims,
people are asked to bring in things.
There are some exaggerations in some schools. But I know, before you select a school where you take a student or a learner, you must study a lot of things. How are you going to work out with these schools? What are the requirements like? Will you manage them? Will you afford them? Will the school tolerate you? What are the terms? On which terms are you going to work with the school? I think where you see, as I said, there are some quacker schools who are taking chance of any situation to cause embarrassing changes in terms of requirements, finances. But we also look out for such schools and we guide them. And I tell you, our association is biting. Where we see arrogant schools and ED teachers, we have a big network. We even call in the ministry. We have been working with the commissioners of private schools to put such schools to order. The moment you try, go ultra viral.
I've heard of a school that charges 300,000 for admission.
Yes, that one, it is your choice as a parent. Yes, it is there. I know also of like 3 schools. But it is your choice. As you know, by the time you agree to take a pupil, a student, a child in such an institution, you have capacity. And you must have been convinced beyond reasonable doubt
that I must pay 300 for this.
300. Because for school, we have to give accountability for every resources we receive. And every government official in the Ministry of Education and the district is free and is allowed to come in a school and ask for accountability. How will you use? That one is allowed. It is even in our Education Act.
Your wing has been most affected, private schools. Yes, we have had fires in schools owned and managed by government. But in the private wing, we have had so many schools that have been affected by fires. Where do you go wrong?
The issue of fire is hypothetical. Because when you look at it, it has 2 factors. First, there is an internal factor. 2, there is an external factor. The internal factor is generated by our own staff. Sometimes inconveniences, sometimes challenges with the staff within the school. That is an internal factor. But it is easier to detect an internal factor than an external factor, because it can happen, but you can understand who did it.
So let me first understand the first step. So you're saying there are people who, these schools are burnt by people.
Sometimes by our own.
Like, let me first understand that. These are not accidents like we hear electricity, what. It is human beings that set fire on schools.
Among the internal factor, they can be poor preparations by the school. Preparation means checking electricity, installations, laziness, location of, and also the staff in the school. All those are internal factor. Laziness in the school, administrators on fire drill, sensitization, sitting cameras, mechanisms, firefighting committees in the school. All of those are factors internally, internal factors. And sensitizations have been done for that matter. Even last week on Monday, we are moving in districts. We are in Mukono. Kampala next week we are coming, and we have launched the fire campaign in Kampala. We launched it in Kawempe 2 weeks back. Sensitization. Then those are the internal factors. Laziness. We are brought in partners in solar and You'll find some people still use the candles in the dormitories. We use So all those are challenges within the schools. Now we have better approaches now to handle all those, because even the directors in schools know about this. There are even certain things we don't reveal to the teachers. There is a plan B about the internal factors. We are reserving for ourselves. We talk only to directors. But also the external factors. There are people who are in the community, they are bad neighbors who always want to take charge of the school property. That one is also related to the other issue I talked about. In any way, they want to portray a negative image to the community, so that parents get tired of the school and lose confidence in the school. They come in the school, our school is the boundary, is the class, is the dormitory. They come in, throw something. Those kind of things are there. The land issues are also there. Okay. Someone wants land for the school.
So how are you handling all of those? Because you people know. How are you handling all those? Because some of these fires have taken lives of children.
We have improved security and safety in the schools. We have improved them. And also we have accelerated internal arrangements and organizations as far as mitigating the risks associated with the fires. I would give you an example of one of the schools in Kawala. What saved all the children, it was because of the sensitization the school had made to the learners. By the time the fire started, we suspect it was internal, but by the time the fire started, children know what to do. They communicated, alarm bells were made, children ran through the windows, through the what, and they managed to go to the assembly point. The only learner who died went back to get his clothes. He had run out naked. So that is also an approach. Okay. Sensitizing the staff and keeping vigilance within the school is another factor.
You are defaulters and violators of standard operating systems, congested dormitories, congested classes, things like that. Private schools, how are you handling that?
There are a few mess-ups that we need to put
There is a time
order.
government came up with only 2-leveled deckers. Some private schools still have the 3 and even 4. And the congestion in dormitories is too much.
Such arrangements, if we were to handle issue by issue, when you look at the deckers, it has issues with the ceiling, the cut-off point.
Yes.
So that is something that needs discussion depending on the limits of the building and the setup of the building. However, I'm not saying that it is proper for you to have a 3-decker. I think that is atravile. In any way, there are people who violate, but also the demand is overwhelming. So when we talk of some safety measures and security measures, we should look at them critically so that each one of them does not compromise another. So when we talk about some of these issues, we need time, we need sensitization, because our goal is to keep children safe in schools. No director of a school wakes up and would wish to ban his own students, his own learners. So, but there are issues that we need to bridge up and put in order in one way or the other.
I want your last remark, a message to your colleagues in the private sector, business and parents as we move towards the opening of term 2.
I want to say to the fellow proprietors of schools, we need to be careful with the management of schools and the current challenges we are going through, fires, prices, economic situation. We need to act professionally, and we shouldn't look at over-exaggeration of using a situation to exaggerate things in our schools. We must be patriotic people. We need education. We want education to move on, and we have to sit with the parents to solve problems of fees, to solve problems in our schools, as we have always done. And we want to call on government to reduce on pressure, to understand also the situation within which schools operate under meager resources from poor parents. And overpressing policies that are not helping schools to move forward will not help the sector to grow, seriously to grow and move to another level and catch up with the region as it was. So let us prioritize education, let us help schools to comply, but not cause schools to close and to get stunted. Then we shall move. And lastly, to the parents, please bring children back to school, talk to the school directors, talk to the head teachers so that we keep our children in the schools. Let us understand the situation within which we are operating and we are able to move as a community.
Thank you so much. Mr. Chirabira Hasadu is the chairperson of the National Private Education Institutions Association here in Uganda. Like we had the discussion, they do a lot to say that they better their field so that they are not caught on the wrong side of the law and other standards. My name is Michael Jordan Lukomwa. I'm with the man himself, Davis Kamukama, and Mr. Derek Sechito, helping on the camera work, plus you who has been watching. Thank you so much. Enjoy the night. Bye-bye.